A 20-year-old man named Yura Natsuki stands face to face with the demon god. He unleashes a single slash, killing the demon god. Natsuki starts to cry tears of joy as he's finally able to return home. He suddenly wakes up as his 14-year-old self in front of his friend Mihara Yudo. Yudo tells him that he started dating a girl who Natsuki had a crush on, but Natsuki starts to cry in joy as he hugs his friend. He runs off, excited at the fact that he's finally back in his world. Natsuki explains that he was summoned to another world 6 years ago. The other world was in the worst possible condition, and Natsuki came close to death numerous times. He had to defeat the 4 heavenly kings and the demon king to finally be able to return to his world. Natsuki is glad that he reverted to his age of when he was summoned, and he rushes home to meet his mom Yura Haruko. He starts to tear up again, which confuses Haruko. She then tells Natsuki that his packages have arrived, and he starts to indulge in all of his new clothes. Natsuki starts to list off all the bad things about the other world. The clothes stitched from monster hides, the beds made of wooden boards, the boiling hot summers, the freezing cold winters, the absurd amount of bugs, and the lack of baths. He then tries unleashing his crimson flame magic, expecting it to not work. A massive fireball suddenly appears, unleashing a massive beam of fire into the sky. Natsuki quickly fixes the damages with repair magic, and his mom suddenly barges in wondering what the noise was. He tells her that he accidentally dropped something, and his mom tells him to get ready for dinner. The scene pans over to the Minazuki family's main residence. A woman inside asked 2 girls if they had felt the magical energy from the fire spell, and that it's the strongest energy she's ever felt. She suspects that it might have belonged to a high-ranking demon, and she informs her 2 daughters to observe the situation first before taking action. The next day at school, Natsuki indulges himself in his video game. One of his classmates asks him about how Yudo got a girlfriend and if he was aware of the situation. Natsuki responds that he doesn't really care about that sort of stuff when someone suddenly calls his name. It turned out to be another girl, and she tells Natsuki that she has something to say to him privately. The 2 of them heads up to the roof, and Natsuki wonders if the girl is about to confess to him. The girl suddenly blurts out that she had thought she'd be facing a monster, but it turned out to just be a fellow student. Natsuki is confused, and he asks the girl if they had met before. The girl tells Natsuki that she's from the Minazuki division, and that she's one of his classmates. She suddenly launches an attack at Natsuki, which he managed to dodge. The girl is impressed that he managed to dodge her attack, and Natsuki asks her what her problem was. She tells him that the Minazuki family is a lineage of spiritualists. The girl explains that evil spirits and demons have plagued the world for centuries, and the spiritualists are tasked with battling the monsters. The girl tells Natsuki that she's going to be eliminating him, and he decides to run away. A bunch of creatures suddenly grabbed at his legs, and the girl tells him that she had placed a cursed seal on his leg. She then stabs Natsuki, finishing him off. The girl states that the battle was way too easy, when Natsuki suddenly emerges from the rubble completely unscathed. He starts to laugh, as he had just returned from a rotten world only to now have to deal with spiritualists. Natsuki says that he'll simply destroy anyone who tries to disturb his peace, which enrages the girl. She then unleashes her full strength and takes out her clan's sacred blade, Tsurai. Natsuki easily shatters the sword, saying that it's nothing compared to the demon king and demon god that he's defeated. He then unleashes his demon sword, the blade of chaos, and cuts the girl in half. He panics at how carried away he got and restores her body with healing magic. Natsuki then flees the scene, as he doesn't want to face the girl again once she wakes up. Meanwhile, up in the space, an alien detected the energy emitted from Natsuki, while a winged figure had also sensed the power he unleashed. Natsuki heads back home after school, when he suddenly gets surrounded by a bunch of armed cops. The police chief steps forward, introducing himself as Hisashi Aoyama, and he has some questions for Natsuki. However, it turns out that the 2 of them are already acquainted, and they head over to the police station together. Natsuki explains that Hisashi is an old friend of his mother, as the 2 of them used to be classmates. A woman named Ginko Aoyama brings Natsuki a drink, and Hisashi introduces her as his daughter. Natsuki has no care for hoes, and he asks Hisashi why he was even arrested. Hisashi asks Natsuki if he's aware of spiritualists, and Natsuki's facial expression gave away the fact that he knows. Hisashi explains that the Spiritualists are part of a government organization, and they're tasked with eliminating any demons or humans who misuse their spiritual power. The police are tasked with backing them up, and they've recently received a tip on the arrival of a powerful demon. Hisashi shows Natsuki a picture of his fire spell, and he explains that they traced the source of the energy back to Natsuki. Hisashi tells Natsuki that the police have identified him as either a demon or a human that had awakened dangerous spiritual abilities. Natsuki decides to just reveal his secret, as he then summons his enchanted blade. He tells Hisashi that he was summoned to another world and had to fight a bunch of demons and gods. Hisashi doesn't believe his story, but Ginkgo is amazed at Natsuki's sword. Natsuki gives her the sword, and Hisashi starts to get frustrated. He decides to just put the whole thing aside, and he tells Natsuki to stop using his power. Hisashi explains that Spiritualists will probably be going after him as a result, and Natsuki says that he plans on just living out his life peacefully. Natsuki then asks Hisashi if he's a spiritualist, and he answers that he's simply just an ordinary citizen. We cut back to the girl from the Minazuki family's residence, and we find out her name is Miyako. Her mother reprimands her for going after Natsuki, and Miyako begs her mother for another chance. Her mother does not give her permission, and rather she entrusts the situation to her other daughter, Mio. The next day, Natsuki is walking around a park when he suddenly senses someone watching him. He catches an arrow fired at him, and he is suddenly grabbed by a spirit. Someone tells him that the arrow contained a sealing charm, which completely sealed away his magic. The person turned out to be Mio, and she introduces herself to Natsuki as Miyako's elder sister. Natsuki figures that he'll just have to wrap things up quickly, but he suddenly remembers the promise he made to Hisashi. He tells Mio they don't need to fight, and she responds by kicking him in the face. She then unleashes her twin dragon strike attack, as Natsuki loses his patience and retaliates with his attack. Mio survives the attack with her clothes all torn up, and she decides to surrender. She apologizes for attacking Natsuki, as she had only wanted to test his strength. Natsuki uses his Water of Restoration skill and restores all of Mio's clothes. Natsuki starts to leave, as he had promised Hisashi to stay away from the Spiritualists. Mio hands Natsuki some money and asks him to hear her out. Natsuki immediately changes his mind and agrees to negotiate. Mio tells Natsuki that the Spiritualists are tasked with subduing monsters and civilians with spiritual powers. However, Natsuki is way too strong for them to handle. The Minazuki family wants to negotiate with him instead, and Natsuki agrees to their request. Mio then asks Natsuki how much power he used earlier, and he reveals that he had only used around 10 to 20%. Mio acknowledges his strength, but states that even he is not able to defeat whoever the heck that person is. Back at the Minazuki residence, Mio informs her mother that she had spoken with Natsuki and that he agreed to meet with them. Her mother asks her how Natsuki appeared to her, and she answers that he was very strong while being ordinary. Mio's mother wonders how Natsuki became so strong, and that he could perhaps destroy the Minazuki family for them. The next day at school, Natsuki is approached by his friend Yudo. Yudo tells Natsuki that he's sorry about Noa, the girl that he was dating. He knew that Natsuki had a crush on her, and that he didn't mean to start dating her. Yudo reminds Natsuki of their past. Natsuki would share his crayons with Yudo, and also gave him his new games, Manga, and first bike. Yudo asks Natsuki if he's furious, and says that he never wanted to hurt him. Natsuki is completely fine with everything, much to Yudo's surprise. Natsuki thinks back to how he was constantly being betrayed in the other world, and was almost killed by his former teammates who joined the Demon Lord's army. Yudo awkwardly thanks Natsuki for forgiving him, and goes in to shake Natsuki's hand. Natsuki senses something from Yudo's hand, as Yudo then leaves. He realizes that the sensation was mana, and that Spiritualists might not be the only supernatural thing in this world. Natsuki walks home from school, wondering what was up with the magical power he had felt from Yudo. He's suddenly approached by a girl named An, who refers to him as her big brother. Natsuki walks past her, and An yells at him to not ignore her. She says that she wants to apologize for how she had treated him in the past, and Natsuki speculates that she's most likely a scammer. He walks away, and concludes that she'll probably give up on the scam after this. However, the next day at school, An ends up greeting Natsuki by the entrance. Later that afternoon, She then gives him some of her homemade lunch. After school, she barges into his classroom to go home with him, but his classmates inform her that Natsuki had already rushed back home. On his way back from school, Natsuki is impressed by On's determination to scam, and he suspects that she might be after the money he got from Mio. Later that night, Natsuki wakes up to On sitting on top of him. He drags her outside and asks her how she even managed to get inside his house. On tells him that she got inside with her spare key, and she reminds Natsuki that they used to live together. She shows him a picture of them when they were little and reminds him that her dad and his mom lived together in the house after getting remarried. On says that they got along like real siblings despite not being related by blood, but everything was ruined by someone. That someone is Yudo, and On explains that she had started to feel super attached to him after they met. Their parents ended up divorcing as a result, and they're then suddenly conveniently approached by Yudo himself. On tells Yudo to not come any closer and blames him for tearing her family apart. Yudo grabs Natsuki by the collar and accuses him of manipulating On. On tells Yudo to get off of Natsuki, and Natsuki finally deduces Yudo's magic to be charm. He explains that charm is an ability that turns anyone who comes close into a loyal follower, and that one of the 4 heavenly kings from the other world had used it to enslave an entire kingdom. Yudo starts to punch Natsuki in the face, and Natsuki retaliates by kicking him in the holy jewels. Natsuki then awkwardly tells On to take care of Yudo, and he flees the scene. We cut to a new day with Natsuki walking around a mall. He suddenly gets placed inside a domain, as he's then greeted by an alien. Natsuki tries to run, but is stopped by a barrier. Natsuki activates his abilities and plans to blast his way out. However, the alien quickly corrected the misunderstanding, and he told Natsuki that he simply had a favor to ask of him. The alien shows Natsuki a picture of his fiancée Nancy, and he explains that they came to Earth together for their pre-wedding trip. However, Nancy ended up getting kidnapped by humans, with one of the humans possessing supernatural powers. The alien says that he sensed Natsuki's strong powers, and he asked Natsuki for his help on saving Nancy. Natsuki is reminded of his love for sci-fi, and he agrees to lend his strength to the alien. The alien introduces himself as Jack Landok Jasper Williamson Chamber Hanamaki, but we're just gonna call him Jack for convenience. Natsuki takes to the sky with Jack on his bike, and Jack tells him the location of where Nancy is being held. Inside the facility, Nancy is tied down with a bunch of people overlooking her. Natsuki suddenly bursts through the wall and takes out one of the men. He then proceeds to beat everyone else up when another man emitting magic power suddenly shows up. Jack tells Natsuki to be careful, as that man is the person who captured Nancy. The man activates his powers and restrains Natsuki. He explains that his power is paralysis, which prevents anyone who makes eye contact from moving. Natsuki realizes that the man is a psychic, and the man tells him that he'd do anything for the sake of money. Natsuki easily breaks free of the restraints, and sucker punches the man in the face. He tells Jack to take Nancy, as he plans to make the man pay for kidnapping her. The man starts to beg for mercy, and he explains that he believes that aliens are the descendants of gods. If they study the aliens, then they could perhaps be able to prove that theory. Natsuki has no idea what the man is talking about when he's suddenly hit by a blast of energy. The person who fired the attack is disappointed at how easy that was, and they reveal themselves to be a winged person. Natsuki steps out of the rubble uninjured, which impresses the winged person. The person introduces themselves as Lucifer, an angel sent from the divine realm. She came to Earth to slaughter demons like Natsuki. Lucifer then charges into land a punch on Natsuki, but he manages to block it. Lucifer then retaliates by blasting Natsuki point blank with a beam, and she gets disappointed at how weak Natsuki was. Natsuki suddenly unleashes his power and emerges from the attack with only a few scratches. Natsuki asks Lucifer if she's just a human, and Lucifer tells him that she can't even be compared to humans. Natsuki smiles, as it means that he can go all out. Lucifer charges in for another attack, but Natsuki easily kicks her away. He then follows that up with a punch to her gut, which sends her flying out of the building. Natsuki then flies behind her and tells her that her power is only on the level of one of the 4 heavenly kings from the other world. Lucifer gets enraged, as Natsuki then takes out his sword of eternal darkness. Back at the building, Ginkgo and some other officers arrive on the scene. Jack suddenly approaches the officers, freaking Ginkgo out. He introduces himself to them, and he asks them if they're able to protect all the thugs that Natsuki had beaten up. The building suddenly erupts, as Natsuki realizes that he had went too far. Lucifer is barely able to stand, as she then erupts in power. She summons a holy spear, and Natsuki notes that the power is greater than that of the Demon King and perhaps even the Demon God. Natsuki tells Lucifer that all the humans in the area will be wiped out by that spear, but Lucifer doesn't care. Natsuki uses his intermediate magic and strikes Lucifer with his black raging thunder attack. The entire building collapses as Lucifer lays down completely defeated. Natsuki's body starts to bleed, as his 14-year-old body is unable to handle using such powerful magic. Lucifer yells out to Natsuki, as she then proceeds to recover from her injuries. However, Natsuki points out that her wings are still charred, as Lucifer realized that she had used up all of her power. She blames Natsuki and starts to call him a bunch of names. Natsuki informs Lucifer that he's not actually a demon and is just a regular human. Lucifer starts to sniff him and realizes that he's telling the truth. Lucifer starts to laugh, realizing that she was not defeated by a demon. However, she then notes that being defeated by a mere human is way worse. Lucifer tells Natsuki that she's not allowed to hurt humans, and she flies away while telling Natsuki that they'll settle the score later down the line. Natsuki meets back up with Ginkgo, Jack, and Nancy. Nancy thanks Natsuki for saving her, and Natsuki then asks Ginkgo what happened to Nancy's kidnappers. Ginkgo tells him that the police will take care of them, and he asks her to have the police take care of the wreckage as well. Natsuki then asks Jack and Nancy what they're planning to do next, and they tell him that they're planning to camp outside. Natsuki is against the idea and offers for them to stay at his place. Ginkgo is against it, as the two aliens look too out of place. Jack and Nancy then takes on human forms, and Ginkgo decides to give in. Ginkgo takes the whole group back to Natsuki's house, and Natsuki's mom prepares food for everyone. Jack and Nancy both thank Natsuki for his hospitality, and Natsuki asks them to let him ride in their spaceship in return. Ginkgo is impressed at how Natsuki is able to get so close to the aliens, and Natsuki says that it's simply because they're good people, unlike some actual humans. He then adds that one of his childhood friends also turned out to be a psychic, and Ginkgo asks if he's talking about Mahara Yudo. Natsuki is surprised that she's aware of him, and Ginkgo tells him that the police keeps tab on every human with supernatural powers. The police don't view Yudo as a threat yet, which is why they're leaving him alone. Ginkgo then warns Natsuki to stay away from psychics, especially the Minazuki family. She tells him that one of her colleagues had went to investigate the mansion, but they weren't even able to get close due to how eerie the atmosphere was. The police suspects that the Minazuki family might be doing something dangerous inside the mansion, which is why Natsuki should stay away from them. Back at the Minazuki family's main residence, the head of the house, Kaya, orders her subordinate Hiragi to bring Natsuki over to tomorrow's meeting. The next day, Natsuki sees Ginkgo, Jack, and Nancy off, as another car then pulls up on his driveway. A person steps out, introducing herself to Natsuki as Yada Hiragi. She tells him that she's been ordered by the head of the Minazuki family to pick him up. The two arrive at the residence, and Natsuki asks Hiragi if she's also a psychic or if she's the older sister of the Minazuki girls. Hiragi says that although she serves as an instructor for the girls, she's merely just a servant at the end of the day. Hiragi brings Natsuki over to the reception hall, where the entire Minazuki family is sat waiting. The head of the family introduces herself to Natsuki as Minazuki Kaya, and she bends down to apologize to him. Kaya tells her two daughters to apologize as well, and they comply. Kaya says that normally those who gain power become incredibly arrogant. However, Natsuki does not fall into that category. She asks Natsuki how he got his power, and Natsuki suddenly remembers the promise he made to Hisashi. He says that he just randomly got his powers one morning, and that perhaps it was from drinking a lot of soy milk. Miyako jumps up in anger and tells her mother that Natsuki is dangerous. Kaya tells Miyako to watch her tongue. However, one of the elders takes Miyako's side. She says that the Minazuki family doesn't need to fear a small child, and starts to unleash her power. The others refer to her as Elder Unkai, and they tell her to hold her power back. Kaya tells Unkai to calm down, and Unkai apologizes. However, she looks at Natsuki's expression, noting that he's trembling in fear upon seeing her power. She says that Miyako and Mio only lost because of their inexperience, and the other members start to wonder if Kaya was wrong about Natsuki. Meanwhile, all Natsuki could think about is how Unkai has her nose hairs sticking out of both nostrils. Unkai then asks Kaya what they're going to do about Miyako's sacrifice, and she says that Miyako has too much potential to be sacrificed. She suggests Mio to be sacrificed instead, as she's nothing but a failure with her father's origins being a complete mystery. Cyan, the Minazuki clan advisor, jumps in and tells Unkai that they can't oppose the declaration made by Her Highness. The two of them starts to argue, and Kaya pulls Natsuki aside to go somewhere more private. Natsuki asks Kaya about the sacrifice, and Kaya tells him that the Minazuki family has borrowed power from the land god that rules over water for generations. The land god is named Michi, and they've protected the land from many disasters. However, the Michi could no longer maintain their godly power after taking in all the pollution, so the Minazuki family started to offer up sacrifices. 5 maidens have already been sacrificed, and Miyako has been chosen to be the 6th sacrifice. Natsuki is reminded of the time he saved a girl who was supposed to be sacrificed to a dragon, and the girl had apparently fallen in love with the dragon and became angry at Natsuki for killing it. Natsuki then asks Kaya why she brought him to a bamboo forest, as Kaya suddenly draws her blade and challenges Natsuki to a fight. Kaya swings her blade at Natsuki, and he manages to dodge her attack. Kaya says that she had originally thought Natsuki to be someone with power surpassing the gods. However, she is unable to sense anything from him. She needs to personally judge his power herself, as she then takes out a talisman. She summons her Shikigami, Yuko the fox spirit, who then attacks Natsuki with its breath. Kaya leaps in to attack Natsuki, but Natsuki manages to break her blade and kick her down. He then gets attacked by Yuko, who ends up swallowing him. Back at the residence, the people continue to argue about the sacrifice. Cyan then asks Mio what she thinks, but Miyako interrupts and says that she's willing to be sacrificed. She then adds that someone as worthless as Mio would not make a worthy sacrifice. Miyako tells Mio to not get the wrong idea, as she had never thought of her as her sister. The group suddenly feels a tremor, as we then cut back to Kaya's battle with Natsuki. Kaya wonders if she was wrong about Natsuki, and she orders Yuko to return. Yuko's mouth is suddenly burst open, as Natsuki emerges from its dead body. Kaya kneels down and surrenders to Natsuki. She then asks Natsuki if he's willing to save the Minazuki family, and Natsuki asks her what she wants him to do. Kaya tells Natsuki that she wants him to kill Mizuchi, the land god of the Minazuki family.